how to remove barriers to a more sustainable building industry. Hi, my name is Marcin Wojciech-Żebrowski, and this is the newest episode of Urbcast, my podcast about urbanism, architecture, cities, and many more. Removing barriers in a more sustainable building industry is crucial in tackling climate change. The Council for Sustainable Building is working towards creating a healthy and durable built environment with minimal climate impact. Through developing certification systems, offering education and training, and leading development projects, the Council is promoting sustainable practices across the industry. The Council gathers a lot of stakeholders, a lot of different companies that work with designing our cities to push the agenda for more sustainable development, to secure that the buildings we've built and the developments that we do are harming our planet less and less. The Danish Council for Sustainable Building, Rådet Byggeri in Danish, was formerly known as the Green Building Council Denmark, and is a part of a big network of different countries working together for creating more sustainable development within the building industry under the name of the World Building Council. My guest today is Sisse Canguilhem, who is the CEO of the Council for Sustainable Building in Denmark. She has a great experience in public affairs, green transition, partnership, government relations, strategy, and organization. For more than 10 years, she was a part of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Trade Council in Denmark and abroad, and has a solid understanding and profound experience in engaging with both private and public stakeholders. Today, I ask Sisse what is the role and the tools of the Danish Council for Sustainable Building, what made her change her career and be involved in the building industry, how do the building certification systems work, for example DGNB, what can be a game changer to achieve more sustainable building industry, and will future urban developments be harmless to the planet, and what is the role of comfort in all of that? If you are eager to learn about the benefits of collaboration, the Council's work, Sisse's involvement, and learn how to make the building industry more sustainable, you are in a good place. Welcome to the newest episode with Sisse. I'm really happy to meet you. Thank you for hosting me, Sisse.
Well, thank you very much for having me for this podcast. I've been looking forward to talking to you about this very exciting subject that we're going to discuss today.
Yes, as I just mentioned to you, I'm very interested in the topics around architecture, urbanism, cities, building industry as well. And I think that the Green Building Council that was a part of this podcast already, I was interviewing the representatives of a Polish Green Building Council and also German Green Building Council. I was just wondering, why didn't I talk to you? Because I'm living in Denmark, I'm living in Copenhagen for some years now. And I think that Denmark is a country that is really forward-leaning if it comes to sustainability. Mm-hmm. And it would be great to get your perspective on that, especially that we are talking just a couple of days after a big change that happened here. Can you share something more about this big change for you and what does it mean?
Of course, I'll be happy to do that. Last week, we had the great pleasure of revealing our new Danish name. We are still the Green Building Council Denmark when we are abroad, because as you said, there are other green building councils worldwide that we also work closely with. But in Denmark, we are now called Rådet for Bæredygtigt Byggeri, which more or less means the same as a Green Building Council. But we found that it was an appropriate time to show that we have come to a very different place in our work. The Green Building Council Denmark has been working for 12 years in Denmark, very focused on the certification called DGNB, which is the sustainability certification based on the Brundtland definitions of both socially, economically, and environmentally. And a lot of good colleagues here have been very dedicated to developing this for the past 12 years. And then as of 2 years ago, we got a new chairman of the board here who had new ambitions also together, of course, with the colleagues in the Green Building Council. So we have started also to be much more vocal about the work we do, of course, sharing all the great technical knowledge that our technical colleagues are providing, but also trying to become a voice within the political discussions. Because what I found very interesting, I came to the Green Building Council 1 year ago. I came from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and what I found extremely exciting about this place is all the substantial knowledge and data that we have, and we can actually go out and make political comments and statements and so on based on data, which is a great luxury, I think. So this is one of the things we do. We'll be more active in the public debate. We will provide more analysis to make even better decisions. And apart from, of course, DGNB, which is a cornerstone in our work, we are also working with the European taxonomy now. So the change of name signals that we are doing the same as before, but also a lot more. And we would really want to use all this knowledge to make informed decisions by politicians and others. So we find it very important to be out there and speak the case of more sustainable ways of living.
You've mentioned your previous experience with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I was actually curious while preparing for this conversation, what made you to make this change, this transition to the Green Building Council? Was there like an element that made you make this transition? Were you always interested in cities and architecture, or was there something else?
I think what really got me curious about the Green Building Council is the fact that I see a lot of potential here. You know, buildings and in Denmark are accounting for 30% of the CO2 emissions. And it's kind of like not when we talk about we have to do things to prevent a climate catastrophe and so on, we are often looking at a lot of other things than buildings. And I just thought to myself, here's a real possibility to make an impact and to help promote that we build in a more sustainable way. So it was actually the great wish to be part of something that where you can provide a positive change and a huge potential. Because, of course, being responsible for 30% of the CO2 emissions is a huge liability. But it's also a huge possibility, because if we can provide solutions of how to reduce these emissions, it is also a very good possibility for export and providing other countries with solutions. So I think I was intrigued by the big possibilities I see in this area of work.
Definitely. I think that during this discussion, I would like to talk about the opportunities that you might provide the whole building branch. But to someone who is not familiar with your work, I hope that most of the people listening to this podcast already know what is Green Building Council and what does it do. How would you describe your daily work and how the name change to Council for Sustainable Building, if one might say in English, how did that influence what you do daily?
I think if we talk about the overall company, Green Building Council, what we do daily, there's a lot of our colleagues are engineers and architects and so on, and they are deeply involved in developing the manuals to making the DGNB certification. This is happening in very close collaboration with the entire value chain in Denmark. So we have a lot of people coming in, having a lot of meetings in the city and so on, because the way that we can provide the most relevant and accurate certification is by inviting in the people who work with this daily. So I would say generally for everybody here, it's very much about being sure that we are hearing our stakeholders. Also, we are a member organization. We are more than 700 members in the Green Building Council Denmark. And of course, our value is based on how we can best help our members work with sustainability in the built environment. So I would say also for myself, if we talk about my daily work, it's a lot, of course, discussions with colleagues on where we should position ourselves, but it's also a lot of talking with different stakeholders. Of course, we go to the parliament tomorrow, we have a meeting there, but it's also very much talking with our members and understanding their situation, because we want to provide more sustainable ways of living for everybody. And of course, our members are in very different stages of their work within sustainability. So we have some tools for the larger public where you can adjust on the way you do it. And we also extremely ambitious tools. Just 2 weeks ago, we launched a new certification called Planet. And the reason for this is because it's working towards the planetary boundaries. Of course, we're not there because then we should stop building entirely. But together with many good colleagues in the business, we have developed this. And it's basically taking a lot of the planetary boundaries and seeing how can we provide a roadmap to get there. So I would say that it's a lot of interaction with both decision makers, members, knowledge institutions, and so on, because it's the best way to provide a relevant certification and all the things we do if we have as many people from the value chain, but also decision makers with us.
But 700 members is a big number, I need to say. And I wonder, how can you make sure that you share the same values and that you share the same message with the world, right? Because as I assume, there are different architecture offices, there are engineers, but there are also different stakeholders, also from the material production branch as well. And of course, those companies, they would like to have biggest growth and impact and income as well, right? Because they are businesses. But how can you make sure that you align if it comes to those core values and the planetary boundaries as well?
We, of course, are here for our members to provide them the best possible service, but we are a non-for-profit organization with the objective to promote sustainability within the built environment. So we are not going to take special measures for different members. We are working overall to promote sustainability. So this is kind of core also because we want to be an independent voice who can provide substantial knowledge. And of course, we have to be able to act as a non-for-profit organization in this regard and give our best estimate for the given subject. So of course, we have our members in and they provide us with their knowledge, but we also have the overall arching incentive to promote sustainability in the built environment.
I need to say that I'm also extremely interested about the urban scale and in general, how can you integrate the urbanism approach into the GNB and how to design for more sustainable futures, whatever it means nowadays, right? Because I feel that the boundaries of sustainability itself as a word are blurred. So if it comes to the cities, how do you work with the companies and overall with the building industry, with maybe also property industry to promote the sustainability in context of urban developments? Because of course we are having here in Denmark less and less land available and still there are more and more people coming, right? So there's overall this growth. But yeah, it might get a bit contradictory.
Of course, I mean, already today, more than half of the world's population is living in cities. And we're just seeing a trend that's going to grow. So more and more people are going to live in cities. And of course, here, it's extremely important that the development of cities to host all these newcomers, new citizens, is done in the most possible sustainable way. And here, as I started out saying, we are based on the UN definition from the Brundtland report in our way of working. So, of course, we have the environmental qualities that are very much in focus now, but we also focus on the social and the economical qualities of sustainability. And the way we work with this is we actually have certification for city areas. And the thing is, when you create a city, and you know this, I guess, just as well, it has to be livable and people have to thrive there in order for it to be successful. At the same time, you also, of course, have to take into account the environmental imprint that cities are making. But our focus is very much on the transformation and renovation of existing properties, trying to find new ways to do that. Because as we know, a lot of CO2 is 10% is already in the building before you even start using it. So the less new materials we have to take in, the better possible. And when we measure with our city DGNB for cities, we also look into, for example, measures as access to public areas. This, of course, provides something for the people living there, that they have access to public areas. But in some extent, it also spills over on the environmental qualities, because when you have public space where you can go and your children can play and you can drink your coffee, you might need lesser square meters for yourself as a family, because you feel that your home is bigger than your actual square meters, because you can benefit from the areas around. So we really try to integrate this. You can also say the focus on biodiversity in cities. It's of course good for nature, but it's also proven that people are thriving more when you have nature in the city areas. So in many ways, we are trying to, we have very specific criteria on how to evaluate the cities. And what we believe is that the more transparency we can provide with data, the easier it is and the less risk you have of greenwashing and so on. Because when you don't know what is inside a given building or a given area, it's very difficult to measure whether or not you have lived up to certain qualities. So we really, with our certification, are trying to provide data and transparency for people to take the right decisions when they are developing cities.
I think it's hard to discuss and argue with data, right? It's something that when measured, right, it is something objective. When you say that the data is something that should be the driving force in the transformation of the buildings and the city districts, you use an example of maybe family actually using less space within the apartment because they might just have some shared facilities maybe in the building or outside the building even. But someone could argue that it leads to decrease in comfort, that it would mean that someone would need to live less comfortably, right? With giving out some of the daily facilities. And I think that overall, this notion of decreasing our comfort will be something that we will need to face very soon, or maybe we are already facing in the midst of the energy crisis.
Yeah, this is a very relevant discussion to have. And of course, this is not yet within our certification, but as our role at Green Building Council, we are happy to take these discussions and try to get people together, because it is true. If you look back to the 1950s, one-family houses were like 150 square meters. Today, one-family houses is above 200 square meters. So we have also developed, as you're saying, a certain level of comfort. And of course, this is a development that would have to take into account when we have to develop new cities. We actually we have a certification for one-family houses. And a possibility there is to measure the CO2 emission per person. Because often the thing is, when you measure CO2 emission per square meter, the bigger you make the house, the lower becomes the number. Because then you have more square meters to spread it out on. So we are also looking into doing it per person, because what is important if you want to reduce the CO2 emissions, it is to look more into to smaller housing and smarter housing. But it's also a question of price, because living in the cities is becoming every day. Prices are high for living in cities. So you will also be able to have cheaper housing if you have fewer square meters. But of course, I think that it's something that everybody is going to face, that we cannot continue to living in the same comfortable way that we might have been doing before. But I think that we can also arrange in different ways that will actually provide good alternatives to having huge spaces.
What will be the role of certification in all of this? We've mentioned a couple of times the GNB certification system. How can it help to promote this sustainable living and high quality urban development? Maybe you could also just briefly tell us, to all the listeners, how does this certification system works in general, so everyone is on the same page.
Sure. I'll be happy to. As I said, you have the possibility of working with all three qualities of sustainability. So you have the social, the economical, and the environmental. So for example, for the environmental, you look at your life cycle assessment. You look at water circulation, how you can reuse drinking water. You have land use also. How do you use the land? Biodiversity. Then also you have a focus on healthy materials, indoor climate, accessibility, mixed housing. So you have both private and public housing and so on. So actually with this certification, you can get, it's like a point system where you can, where you want to get the most points possible, and you can adjust on these different variables in order to get these points. So it's working as a way to measure how you can do sustainability, and you have specific tools. At this very moment, we are working on something called LC Cities. It is like the LCA, the life circle assessment, but made as a tool for urban planning. We're doing this together with Aalborg University, Rambøll and Dansk Blyplan-laboratorium. We think this will be a good way to measure on a city scale. And then we are also working on a starting tool, which aims to improve the discussion and decision-making in the early stages of city planning and urban development. The tool targets the collaboration between the municipality, the developer, and the advisor in order to have an informed discussion, because what we could also see with DGNB and certification is the earlier in your planning that you're actually looking into this, and the more information you have, the less expensive and the more smooth the process is going. So it's really to sit down with all involved players in the beginning of the process and saying, okay, how can we do this? And we are working to develop at this very moment, and we hope we'll be able to publish it in the summer this year. So these are some of the ways that we do that. So it's a lot about providing tangible information, tangible solutions, so we can turn sustainability from something that can be a bit abstract. And when we talk about the Paris Agreement and 1.5 degrees, I don't think a lot of people have an actual idea of how to get there. We are trying to provide tools that can help you adjust to more sustainable ways of developing a city. Not saying that will be within the boundaries of the Paris Agreement, because that's a different talk, but you have to be able to adjust what you're doing in a more sustainable way. And we provide the actual tools for this. So it's very much a process of understanding the various measures, having the discussions with everybody involved so you can take informed decisions when you do your city planning.
Do you think that certification is the best way to achieve sustainability in the built environment nowadays? Because there is some criticism about the certifications, right? That it might lead to some greenwashing, because there might be some developers just aiming to get the stamp or the emblem of the certification, but then not providing the real sustainability. Do you see those threats?
Certification is a tool to take informed decision. DGNB has been developing since it first started in Denmark 12 years ago. So we have the entire value chain. We have discussions with them every year to develop new measures. And you can compare the DGNB of today with the one 12 years ago. It's a completely different standard. So we are continuously improving this in order for it to be a real tool that can provide real solutions. Certification is one way of providing solutions to build more sustainably. But what we also see as a very important new factor is the EU taxonomy, where you have to categorize the financial flows. Either they live up to taxonomy or they do not. And this has an effect on the entire value chain also in the built environment, because all of a sudden you actually have to provide data on what is inside your buildings or inside your portfolios. And this also, in our regard, will promote sustainability, because when the money is starting to make this kind of request, then it has a very huge impact. And we can see that many of the demands from the taxonomy are the same that we're using in DGNB. So we have an advantage because we have been training for this for 12 years to provide this kind of transparency within data. And what is really interesting, I found, is that during the last year, the new members we have gotten in our organization is many lawyers and financial institutions. And it says something about the built environment and the impact it has when you start to have different kind of players as members. Previously, it has traditionally been the advisors, architects, material producers, investors, and so on. But now we really see a shift, and it says something about what we are looking into now with the EU taxonomy. And we are working very closely, namely with our EU colleagues in the Green Building Council in Europe, to provide the Commission with solution of how to make the technical screening criteria in order for it to be able to implement it outside in the business. So this is something we are very much involved in. And we're very dedicated to develop tools for the taxonomy so that everybody can access it and handle the demands from the taxonomy. Because even though that right now it's only the very big companies who need to report on taxonomy, it will have an influence on the entire value chain, because even as a smaller player, when you have to take up loans and so on, this will be into play. So our mission in these coming months and years is really to provide the best possible tools to make the taxonomy what it is supposed to be, something that turns the investments into more sustainable investments, and provide everybody with tools for this. So I think it's a very exciting time to be working with the building industry, because a lot of stuff is happening. And if we play it right, we can really help move everything in a more sustainable direction.
So would you say that maybe one day it will be possible? Because before you've mentioned that, the more sustainable building is the one that wasn't built, right? That maybe we shouldn't build the buildings at all. But do you think that we will be able to reach a level in which the buildings, but not only the buildings, but also the urban development that we introduce to our cities, that it will be such a sustainable, taking into consideration all the numbers, of course, such a sustainable development that it will do so little harm to the planet that we will be able to carry on with that development, and by the same time reach the Paris Agreement goals or other climatic goals?
It's a very big question, because I sincerely hope that we are moving in that direction. Yeah. And I think that we are seeing a lot of the big players who are increasingly taking this very serious, also helped by the taxonomy, but also motivated by a wish to save the planet. And I see, if we just look within the last couple of years and the new solutions that have been provided and the new ways of doing things, I'm hopeful. I mean, I think I'm also a realist, so it will take it. It's not going to be something easy. We will all have to make sacrifices by the number of square meters or something like this. But we see solutions with new materials, new ways of building, focus on transformation of existing buildings and so on, that should help us get in this direction. The DGNB Planet that we developed is taking the first step in a roadmap to get to being Paris compliant and within the planetary boundaries. And we have a lot of interested colleagues out in the business for this, which also gives me a lot of hope that people are like, okay, it's going to be extremely hard to build within these boundaries, but we also see a lot of people who are actually willing to give it a try and thinking of new ways. And I'm very hopeful also for the younger generations, because I see quite a few of younger architects, engineers, but also just the young generation in general, who are not taking no for an answer, who are going to ask for new solutions. So I think there's a lot of things right now that could make it possible, but we will really have to, we're not going to get there sleeping. We'll have to adjust a lot of things.
I'm also an optimist, so maybe that's why, but I feel like there is this change towards more informed architects. I don't know if it happens all around the world. I hope so. But when I look in Denmark, I guess that there might be some kind of a change, generational change maybe in the way how we approach architecture, that it's not only about the final outcome and the physical shape, but actually how it impacts the planet and the environment around it. We just mentioned a couple of tools, and I was wondering, I'm just asking about your personal opinion, because I know that we are discussing extremely broad topic and it's hard to find an answer because it's such a big thing. But when you look into the future, let's say maybe the closest 5-10 years, do you see any more tools or things that will change the game of the building industry? Do you think that it will be maybe EU taxonomy that will be taking the lead in those, or maybe there is something that we are not aware of yet, but will just change the industry?
I think, but this accounts also for other industries. I think the EU taxonomy is a great Kickstarter. I also believe it's not enough, but it's making people aware of what it means to work with sustainability. So it's a great first step, but we also have to push a lot behind the taxonomy. I think that because it's going to be driven by the money flows, that's always a very good place to start, because then the rest of the value chain tend to follow. I think that we have to make people much more aware of what they can do with their own homes and the impact they actually have in this way, the decisions they can make. I think we are all aware of that flying is very bad and that eating red meat is not very good either. But our buildings account for 30%. I would be very keen for people to actually understand the power they have in demanding when they are going to get a new kitchen. Okay, do I need to take everything out? Can I actually refurbish some of the old kitchen? Is there other possibilities? Actually using the power they have as people who rent their housing or own their housing, because I think that will really change. Because once you have the demand for this, then it will be an advantage to provide it. And I am an optimist by nature. I really am. So I have a hope and I believe that we will get in that direction. And the more informed everybody get, the more precise demands we'll be able to put down. Because right now it's also because we don't know, as a house owner or as a renter, you don't know what you can ask for. You don't know which impact the different things have. But it's at least our ambition. That's also what I said about the political agenda. We want to get housing up on the political agenda when we talk about climate, because right now it's not one of the topics that are being discussed when climate is up. So we need to push this agenda forward for people to make more informed decisions. We can provide the transparency and help people make better decisions, also the broader public, I believe.
Is there any case study, a project that you could share as an example of your contribution to achieving this sustainability, either through the DGNB certification or maybe by influencing or discussing the development with the partners, with the potential clients? So something that had this positive impact of your work.
I'll have to get back to you on a specific case, but what I can say is it has taken us 9 months to develop the DGNB Planet certification. We worked together with 41 colleagues from the entire value chain and also universities and some of the most ambitious when it comes to climate. And it has been extremely useful because we've been able to gather these people. And I can assure you, it's not been easy discussions. People are very serious about this. They have big ambitions. But the fact that in 9 months, we have been able to sit and come with a first suggestion of how it could look like to work towards the planetary boundaries, that gives me a lot of hope. Because normally this could have taken a lot longer, or people wouldn't have come to a mutual understanding of how we should do this. So I believe our role as a mediator and getting various people together to promote sustainability is really where we can have a lot of impact. So I think that's a very good example. And I'm new to this business, to the building industry, but I'm so impressed by how dedicated people are and how willing to share their knowledge to move this agenda forward. And I think it's very ambitious people who work within this business. And also because people are really willing to share, how did we get to this low CO2 per square meter? People are ready to share their information. And I think that's groundbreaking for a sector, because it's not this is not going to happen in many different industries. So I think we're very lucky, and I have hope that this is going to help change things a bit faster.
Since you've mentioned sharing and promoting sustainability, inspiring projects as well, and the whole approach, I would love to ask you for a recommendation. Would you have ideally a book recommendation, but not necessarily something that will inspire the listeners after this conversation, and maybe it will allow them to develop their knowledge?
That's an excellent question. Something that inspired me enormously just before starting working here was the film Don't Look Up. I think you might have seen it.
Yes.
And we all know that this is what is happening. And the fact to see it unroll and people not being able to take the needed decisions out of wanting to have comfort or not changing their ways, for me, that it's not like it brings you a lot of hope, but it kind of opens your eyes and shows you that things need to be done. We can not just continue as we used to be. So that is, I think that's inspiring in a way that let's not finish up like they do in this movie. Let's take action before this. And I have hope that people are smarter than they are in this film. But I think it's an excellent image of how it can end up if we don't take this extremely seriously.
And your biggest goal for 2023 is?
If you see in the newspapers that the politicians are talking about the built environment as part of the solution to the climate crisis, if this starts to become something that they talk about, then I'll be very happy, because this is how we move the agendas. We move it with the certification from the sector and so on, but we also have to move it from political level. So I hope this will be on their radar, and we'll be happy to provide them with all the data and knowledge they need to make this work.
Sisse, thank you very much for your inspiring voice in this discussion, and I hope that we will manage to reach out to many people who will be inspired, not only within the built industry, not only architects, designers, engineers, but also people who are citizens.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the newest episode with Sisse, the CEO of the Danish Council for Sustainable Building. I hope that it was helpful and that it made it a bit more clear if it comes to all different certifications. And in general, how can we make the building branch a bit more climate and planet friendly? I believe that it is possible, but there is a very, very long way in front of us. If you would like to develop this topic, feel free to contact Sisse or me. If you would like to take this discussion further, you can also follow Urbcast on LinkedIn, Facebook and Instagram. You can as well join the bi-weekly newsletter on my website at urbcast.pl/en for English. Talk to you in English in 2 weeks.